Hello, everybody. It is Saturday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I am Chris Weuve. I have with me, as I won't say as always, here in spirit, just like MacArthur in the Philippines, Pat is always here in spirit. But I have Pat Doyle with me this week, and this is Starfleet Tactical. And thank you very much for spending your Saturday night listening to me not speak for my employer. So now that we got that out of the way, Pat, what have you been up to?
I have one fewer employer to not speak for, but I still don't speak for my other one. So
that's true. That's true. You do. And so Pat's been busy for a while. My apologies to everybody, because I thought I was going to do a show last week, and then I had the opportunity to go watch a friend of mine who's in a band. He's retired and joined a band. And so I got a chance to watch his band play. And so I decided to go ahead and do that because it's not an opportunity I get to have very often. So I went ahead and did that. But and then for a long time this week, I didn't know whether it was going to be Pat and I talking about Babylon 5, or whether it was going to be Chris Carlson and I talking about the French torpedo boat carrying cruiser La Foudre.
Why didn't he just show up here too anyways, as long as you had him on tap?
He said something about not wanting to crash the party. I kind of thought it was kind of silly, but it might actually be that he didn't really have a whole lot to say about Babylon 5. And we're still going to do La Foudre later.
Okay.
And so like I literally had two different things going on where I was trying to prep two different shows, and then I realized, oh shit, I've got like half as much time to prep, or a third as much time to prep as I would normally, because I spent most of today in the Museum of the U.S. Air Force, which is technically walking distance, although I would never walk it because it would be a really long walk. I mean, it's probably like, it's about a mile as the crow flies and about 3 miles as the crow drives. And so I spent most of the day there, which meant that I had to sort of like prep two shows, because the upshot in all this is Pat was going to be on the show. If Pat could be on the show, Pat wasn't going to know if he could be on the show until what, like 6 a.m. your time?
Technically I could have been on call for work tomorrow at 4:30 in the morning. So, but they never returned my call. So
they never returned your call. So at some point, Pat was able to say, no, I'm not on tap. And so I can do the show. And so at that point, Pat became, we were at that point, I'm going with plan A, which is Pat being on the show. And I could stop thinking about La Foudre. But I started watching Babylon 5 episodes to catch up on the second half of season 1 of Babylon 5, and have been doing that all week. And then I went to sit down and sort of put together some slides on it. I thought, oh, it'll take me like 20 minutes to put together slides. And like 2 hours later, I'm finishing up the slides going like, oh shit. I really, really hope that I don't have a situation where I have to do La Foudre instead, because I don't have time to prep the slides. And then about that time, Pat sent me a message saying, I'm in. And I went, yay, I guessed right. I prepped the right slides. So that's the plan that we ended up executing. But La Foudre is still on tap. I don't know exactly when Chris and I are going to do that. Chris's schedule is a little bit up in the air going forward a little bit, because a good friend of Chris's is in the hospital right now. Good. And this is somebody that I used to work with briefly. I didn't know him nearly as well as Chris did. And also 2024, I really, really hope that it doesn't turn out that somebody I like dies every month of 2024, but so far 2 months, 2 deaths. So my old boss, Peter Perla, one of the giants of professional wargaming, passed away in January unexpectedly. And then my friend Wade Racine, those of you who are into 2300 may recognize that name, because he's done some work in on the 2300 role-playing game over the years. And at one point he was at White Wolf and stuff like that. he passed away about a week and a half ago. So that was tactical but not strategic surprise, because he had numerous health crises, and including he'd been in the hospital recently, but he'd gone back to work, and just, I don't know the details, but it all caught up with him. So, and the funny thing is if you buy the 2300 product, Ships of the Frontier, there is a Racine class fleet intelligence ship, and that's because we, including Wade, expected that he was going to die about 2 years ago, because he was basically getting ready to enter hospice care because he had some severe issues. And they, I won't say they fixed him, but they got him out of the hospital, and they got him back to work. And they weren't able to fix the underlying stuff, but they were able to stop the crisis. So Wade actually thought he was I won't say he was as amused as everybody. We were all thankful. He actually was really, really amused that they had named a ship after him as a, immemorial ship, and then he didn't die. So, but Godspeed.
Yeah. Rough.
Yeah, so that's what it's going to be like. So,
yep, just lost a coworker myself. So yeah.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. But
so now we're going to talk about a TV show where half the cast has died since the show.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's too bad too.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the slides.
Go for
it. I don't know if you were watching earlier. Axonar was doing a live stream because they actually had their last day of shooting today. So,
oh, really? Great.
Yeah, knock on wood, all the principal photography should be done. At least everything they had planned. Today was the last day of shooting.
Nice.
They had sort of thrown together a live, an Axonar live report that had some technical issues and stuff. In fact, I even logged on at one point to try to help them solve their technical issues and introduce new, different technical issues. Because I forgot I was watching it on my phone, and then I logged on, and so we were getting the echo from the phone. So in any event, I put together some slides. So let's go ahead and go through these. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So here's what the schedule currently looks like. And this is for me only, because Pat is about to go off and disappear into the black hole of pilot training for a couple of months, thereabouts. And so now you're going to be in Atlanta, right?
I will. Yes.
And I understand that there is there's a Star Trek bridge set in Atlanta.
Yeah. So if we can make that work, that'll be great. Yeah. I would love to.
We don't know yet if we can make it work, because Pat has no idea what his schedule is going to look like. Pat's basically doing 3 months of grad school real quick. So we'll see what his schedule looks like. But if Pat's schedule supports it, I will get my ass down to Atlanta and we'll do a show from the Ares Studios set.
Yeah, I guess I'll even break out my Star Trek captain's tunic.
You should take it with you. Make sure you take it with you.
Will do.
Now, that having been said, can I not change? I don't think I changed. Why? Yeah, okay. I don't think I changed the color on that one. I think that one flavor of green is the wrong color. In any event, next week I should be good for a show. 2nd of March, probably. That may change. In fact, actually, I had a conversation today that actually indicated it may be moving towards no, because I may be actually doing a ship tour. I may be in Norfolk that weekend doing a ship tour on that day with the friend of mine who was just at the Air Force Museum, because I'm going to be going to DC for a couple of weeks. 9th of March is definitely out. I'm going to be at Wade Racine's memorial, and then I'll be with my friend. I'll go back up to DC and be at my friend Sean's place. And then, as far as I can tell, for the rest of March and all of April, I'm good. That could change. This frequently does, but currently it looks like I'm good for all that time. And then in May, we start running into problems again because there's something, I forget exactly what it is, but there's something going on that Saturday in May, so it's probably a no. The other thing I was going to say is I've decided I want to do I realized when I went back and I looked at the slides from the last time we did the Babylon 5 discussion, which was over a year ago, I was talking about the Exordium book read along. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to start reading the Exordium series. I figured that'll be several shows worth because I can do at least one show on the tactical combat model and one show on perhaps one show on each of the books, and 5 books, etc. So anybody who's interested in doing a read along, this is my all-time favorite science fiction series. It has some fantastic space combat. It is available in paperback only for the first edition and electronic only for the second edition, which is available from Bookview Cafe, and I think you can also get it on Amazon, actually. But I would strongly, strongly recommend the second edition because they actually beefed up the combat stuff. And the second edition, I and my buddy Arius helped a little bit with that. In fact, I did not realize for over a year that the second edition was dedicated to Arius and I, because that dedication is at the back of the book, not at the front of the book. And because I got to the end of the book and I stopped reading. Why would you read the last like 5 pages of garbage at the end when you've gotten to the end? And if
apparently there's always a small chance that someone has dedicated that book to you.
Yes, and it turns out I think it's literally like if I had flipped the next page, I would have discovered that the book was dedicated to me. And Dave and Sherwood didn't tell me that. they just did it. They didn't tell me. And so finally it's like, oh, I just realized this is cool. So in any event, they don't have the reading order on the Bookview Cafe page, but that's the order there. Phoenix in Flight is the first one, Ruler of Naught, Prison Unsought, Rifter's Covenant, Thrones of Cronus. And so that's the order there. So if you do, if you read the descriptions of them, you can tell. So, all right. Standard caveat. All of the images tonight are the property of the originators. We're here to add educational value through criticism and commentary. In other words, it's all fair use. So Warner Brothers, please don't sue us. Okay. So this conversation is going to be riddled with spoilers. This thing came out 30 years ago. We think we've given you enough time. There are some analytical constraints compared with Star Trek. There's a lot fewer resources to draw upon, although there's some really good ones out there. The Lurker's Guide to Babylon 5, for instance, is fantastic. It's got the standard limitations that you have in all TV shows, right? There's a limited number of characters. Even with an ensemble cast, you still have limited numbers of characters, etc. And so sometimes you sort of go like, well, shouldn't that person be around a lot? And like they come in for one episode and then they go away, and there's no evidence that they're not still doing their job. You just never see them again. There's some real advantages to Babylon 5. This was the first fully CGI show, which means I don't think most people fully appreciate that they do some of the things that really empowered at the time. Like, for instance, you might have a thing where the ship is like this, and you'll do a complete circumvention of the ship. They'll do like a complete spin around of the ship as the ship is flying. Stuff that you just can't do with physical models. They did on a routine basis to sort of change the perspectives, et cetera, and it really gave them some really cool ability. And as I mentioned, there's seven of the people whose names were in the opening credits have passed away since the show ended. And that doesn't include other, some characters who were just in there once or twice, like the Paul Winfield passed away, William Morgan Shepherd passed away. There's a lot of actors who were just there for one or two episodes that have also passed away. So this is just the main cast people. Okay, so I thought I had another slide there that sort of had the overarching theme, but I guess I didn't. So let's go with this. This is the one where there's an accident in the bay that it looked like an accident, and then he was actually being framed for causing an explosion. So it was known. They realized it was sabotaged, and when they searched his quarters, they found the stuff, and he was being framed. So what any thoughts that you have on this episode, Pat?
No, this one has been a long time. This one, if I remember right, like there's quite a few season 1 episodes that are just sort of individual episodes. Maybe it's character development, but it's background on the characters, but it doesn't really, like, if you were going to stay strictly on the overall story that they were telling long term, there's a lot of the season 1 episodes that don't really have an impact on that. I guess that would be what I would say about this one. Other than what you see about them. I like your question there. Did Kemmer survive Santiago's assassination?
Yes, she's part of the advanced team. She comes to Babylon 5, and she's not on the ship with Santiago, but it's entirely possible that she, as part of the security entourage, she may, for a particular trip, may or may not have been on the advanced portion of it, right? So she might have died, but you never hear from her again, right? So you would think this was a recurring theme. You'd think, like, they have this big rebellion that takes place later on, right? Where Earth Force 1 and 2, and there's a civil war, et cetera, et cetera. You would think that there would be at least a little bit of an accounting of all the people that you knew, right? Garibaldi's got to wonder what side she ended up on, right? You'd think.
Yeah. And, well, but we see him in season 5 when who was the captain that took over for Sheridan? Lockley, Captain Lockley. Remember, he doesn't trust Lockley because he doesn't know what side she was on. And then finally they have the big discussion, and he confronts her, and she was like, she gave her side of the spiel. So, but I don't know that we actually learn what Lockley did in the war. And
I can't remember if we learned that either. Well, we're going to find out, because eventually it may, at our current rate of advance, it's going to take us like 12 years, but we'll eventually get to the to that.
It's happening in real time. So. But no, I thought this was one of the decent first season episodes and stuff. There was some good drama and everything. She seemed a bit over the top sometimes, I think, with her need for revenge, kind of, but overall, I thought it was a pretty good episode.
Yeah, and you'll notice that at the very end of the episode, for reasons that are never explained, all of a sudden her hair's down. Her hair is up tight, regulations.
Right.
And then later, okay.
Well, that's one of those filmmaker little subtle things they do to loosen up, right? I couldn't name all those tactics, but that seems like what that is.
And sometimes, like, if you notice things like that, sometimes it's like being hit in the face with it. One thing I will say about the first season episodes in general. So when you watch it the first time through, you sort of conclude that, like, okay, there's a bunch of standalone episodes and they're doing some character development. It's just a standard sort of episodic television. And then later on, you get to the point. There's sort of like 3 phases. That's the first phase. Oh, it's standard episodic television. Then you get to the later seasons, and it stops being episodic, and it very much becomes becomes these long story arcs, and you sort of go, oh, okay, I get it. They were really sort of doing character development stuff before they sort of kicked off on the story arcs.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you watch it again and you go, oh shit, there was all this other stuff that I didn't realize was establishing some essential ground rules of how
Yeah,
this
and they're planting seeds in a lot of cases in the first
planting
season.
seeds, planting a lot of seeds. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to sort of pull those out as we go through, but there's some seeds there. Like, and you may recall there's a seed a little bit earlier in the episode Soul Hunter, which looks like it's just a one-off episode and arguably is you can make a really good argument that it's like the most important episode in season 1. And it just looks like it's a throwaway. So this also is one of the episodes that follows the recurring theme of outsiders coming in to Sheridan's to Sinclair's command and telling Sinclair they're going to do it, they're going to take over.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I think Sinclair is sort of underranked. You would have thought that he's running a station that has 250,000 people on board. You would have thought that they would have breveted him at least to captain and maybe to 1 star.
Yeah, because they do talk about like there were entire generals and stuff that this would have been appropriate for, and the Minbari insists on this lowly commander.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's a long tradition in militaries that you have to give people the rank equivalent to do the job.
Yeah.
In the early days of the United States Navy, through about World War I or right before World War I, the highest permanent rank in the U.S. Navy was Rear Admiral. And if you were doing something that was above Rear Admiral, you put the stars on while you did the job. And then when you left that job, you took the extra stars off again.
Yeah. Yeah. So with Sinclair, I would imagine that he was a commander and there was probably enough hard feelings and anger within Earth Force or whatever politics going on behind the scene that probably they refused to give him somebody somewhere blocked his promotion. That would be my guess.
Yeah, but even so, you got to brevet the guy to be able to do his job.
No, I agree, the right thing to do. But obviously, Earth Force and Earth Dome is highly dysfunctional, and we're only getting to beginning to see that. And so I could see that clearly there were politics and factions, tearing at the tapestry of their world. So
yeah, if Straczynski wanted to, he could have named this entire season "What the fuck is wrong with Earth Dome?" That's the theme too. All right. So when I found this image, my first thought was what I always think of. It's like, what the hell's going on with the glowing tables? Like, is that the worst design that you can imagine for a table?
Yeah, I can imagine trying to write something down on a piece of paper or having to fight that against another tablet. Yeah, it'd be annoying. But
yeah, I mean, I put this up there with the Bridge of the Discovery.
Yeah, but it's all set design. It's just meant to look pretty on a screen.
Yeah, and I mean, the various flavors of new Star Trek have this where like if you were on the bridge of one of those ships, every place you turn, you're staring into a spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah. Lights in a helmet would not be useful, but they do that to light up the person's face and stuff. So whatever. Yes. That's just that's. But anyways, why don't we move on, because we could criticize lighting choices.
One thing I will point out. I point out that at one point Kemmer wants to send a message, and Babylon 5 has purposefully sabotaged their radio gear by running like a level 5 diagnostic or something like that when Star Trek turns. And so she goes, all right, I'll go back to my ship and make a call from the ship. This is important, right? You can't just make a radio, and it's sort of unclear as to exactly how the radio works through the jump gate or interstellar radio, how all that stuff works, but it's clear that you don't just pull something out of your pocket and call back to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
At least she doesn't. That's foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so by any means. This is the one where there's a dockyard accident and the workers are overworked and the gear's under geared and no maintenance and et cetera, and all this goes on, and you end up with at the very end, Sinclair is given the authority to stop the strike, the illegal wildcat strike, by any means necessary.
Yeah, I always liked the turnaround on this one.
The turnaround was nice. It did remind me, though, how many times in season 1 did it end up being about the station's budget?
Mm-hmm.
That's a recurring theme, is the budget of the station. They're constantly talking about the budget of the station.
Limited resources.
Now, as a defense acquisition guy, this warmed my heart that they spend all this time talking about the budget. But it also just sort of highlights that B5 is kind of set up for failure, right? Mm-hmm. They're not willing to resource it properly. They've given they're not willing to resource it. They put a commander in charge, and I understand how he ended up in charge, but the fact that they kept him a commander, they didn't give him the rank necessary to do the job. There's something wrong in Earth Dome.
Yeah. That'll make it harder for him to do the job and get the resources because he's a commander.
Yeah, exactly. We see lots of interesting characters, including this one whose name I can't remember. The actress's name is Katie something. I can't remember the character's name, but we never see her again. And so she's the Union rep, and presumably she's there, and we never see her again. And so that's kind of...
Yeah, ultimately I enjoyed this one.
And, there's a different glowing table, because all the tables glow.
I think that's the same glowing table moved to a different room.
Oh, it almost certainly is. Maybe it's even the same room from another angle.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever...
I think they turned it around.
If you've ever watched the making of documentary for Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
no.
Every scene that takes place inside a castle is in the exact same room. It's just at one point they're shooting this way, at another point they're shooting this way. There's 3 castle scenes indoors. Like when he comes down the stairs, that's on that side of the room. And then they do the one on the other side of the room, and they do one scene where there's a big window in between the 2 characters. And then for the next time they hung a tapestry over the window so you couldn't see the window was there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Limited budgets forces a lot of creativity.
Yes, and on both space stations and movie sets.
Yes.
Okay, so this is part of the theme of Delenn playing with her kindergarten toys, which we see her do this a lot. There's lots of, this multi-layered glass triangle things and they all sort of slot together and stuff like that. And so we see, this is the episode where there's a whole bunch of radar activity.
This is her cocoon, right?
Later on,
right.
We see her play with stuff that looks kind of like this, although a lot of the pieces are different, but it's the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
I just have this image of Straczynski going and saying, I just need random pieces of glass in random shapes. Just do that. And it's like, oh, okay. Just like in Stargate, everything was crystals. All the technology was based on crystals. So you would end up with these really sophisticated crystals on board starships that literally had flames coming out of sconces to light the bridge. I'm not joking. They did that on Stargate all the time. Olive described as enigmatic Minbari puzzly stuff. So yeah, exactly. So, this is a good thought. I wonder if the budget issues was JMS's way to complain about the network not totally giving them big budget. That's fantastic.
Well, that's good. I like that. I like that.
And Dustin says, maybe the glowing table is basically it's a computer panel, but the touchscreen graphics aren't turned on yet. Okay, so we get the first episode with Mr. Morden, and we also get the scene where they've required Londo. The Centauri government has managed to track down, with Londo being sort of the middleman, a priceless artifact that will give the regime some credit. It'll give them some credibility. Credibility is the word I'm looking for. And then there's some backstabbing and double dealing and stuff like that, and the Raiders end up taking the artifact away. Now, this is an episode that actually has a battle in it, which is kind of unusual for first season. It's a standard battle against Raiders. We get the introduction of Morden. We get Dylan playing with her triangles. The agent in this, the one agent, has this miracle radio where he's able to like call off the station with the miracle radio. Although it's possible that it was some sort of relay that was involved with that. And we've got yet another instance of Ivanova, or one of the main cast, getting flight pay. So I don't have as big a problem as some other people do with in Babylon 5, it's always the case that a senior command staff will like jump in a Star Fury and fly off, because I view that as these are people that once a month have to get in a Star Fury and go flying, or they'll lose their flight pay.
Yeah. Well, in the real world,
in the real world, that's how it works. And I talked with plenty of I had an Army helicopter pilot in the cubicle next to me at the last job, and he talked about why did he switch from being a helicopter pilot to being an intel officer. And part of it was, he says, look, as a major, you're always fighting for flight pay. You're fighting for opportunities to get into the cockpit and actually fly. They're few and far between, and you're always like, I got to go do this thing to get flight pay. And he said it's just a pain in the ass. And then it's better to just sort of, an Army major's job is totally and completely thankless. It's sort of the one where that's the rank where everybody gets shit on. And so he said that's why a lot of guys in the Army, apparently, because I had a tanker explain it to me the exact same way that the helo guy did. They get to captain, they've had their sort of small unit command, and they've basically been in a situation where, like, if you're a tanker, you get to go right around in your tank, and riding around the tank is fun. So let's go right around the tank. Oh, by the way, now you ride around on a desk, and you're gonna be the guy that's the focus point of all the shit in the battalion. And at that point, it's like, I might as well just go off and do another job instead. So it doesn't bother me that Ivanova and all these folks are off trying to get flight pay, trying to check that box. Now, when we get to A Voice in the Wilderness, it's a little different when the two most senior people in the station take a shuttlecraft into a known combat situation. Maybe one of them going, you can maybe make the argument that that it was an important enough thing that you needed to have one of the two most senior people there, but having both of them there is a little problematic. This also brings up something that is a recurring problem in this show. And it sort of goes back, in my mind, to the formula stuff we talked about earlier, which is the formula on this show is we'll assume that the command staff is only as smart as the audience. And what I mean by that in this instance, nobody seems to, they kept saying, how are the Raiders doing this? We don't understand where the Raiders are coming from. How could the Raiders be possibly doing this? It's like, maybe it's a mothership. How hard does that have to be to think that maybe it's a mothership of some sort? But nobody seems to want to go to that explanation. Now, having a conversation where somebody says they must have a mothership, and somebody else says, do you know how expensive those things are? No, I can't. There's got to be some other explanation, because that's just, no raider group is going to have the resources available to do that. Which means that when they turn out to have the resources available to do that, it's sort of like, okay, now there's a more interesting mystery. Where did they get the resources to do that? That makes them more interesting, not less interesting, if they do that. But instead, they just sort of do the, oh, wow, there was a mothership. Why didn't we think of that? What do you think, Pat?
No, well, yeah, I get what you mean by that. The sublight ships appearing in different systems, then clearly they have a capability somewhere. So,
yeah, and it just seemed to me that
clearly raiders would be ultimately pretty easy to hunt down, I would assume, if they were limited to just one star system. So, in my mind,
there's some stuff with the time distance calculations in there too, where they talk about, oh, it's 4 hours at maximum thrust. It's like, in the episode, in Voice in a Wilderness, it's like 3 hours away to the specific point around the planet where they were getting the distress signal and all the, or maybe it was in Babylon Squared where that was the case. It was Babylon Squared. 4 hours away at maximum thrust isn't that far away.
Right.
So Babylon 5 has a recurring issue with them just sort of making up numbers in terms of time distance calculations that make sense. And like, I don't, if you need a jump gate to do any of this stuff, right? If they're talking about it doesn't make any sense to me where they're coming or going from in some of this. It's like, are the jump gates that close apart? Why would a ship just be out in tooling around in space? You would think that you would go from a local area to the local jump gate to the next jump gate to the local area. Why are they just doing these long distant transit in real space? If you had a point-to-point system where like this jump gate doesn't get you there, I have to go to this other jump gate instead.
Mm-hmm.
Like I come into this jump point and I have to go to the other jump point. Maybe that might make sense, but A, that's not how this system is set up. And B, if it was, you still have the problem of, where are the jump gates?
So a jump gate just gets a ship into hyperspace. From there, it can kind of go where it wants. Wait. Within its ability to track the next nav beacon.
Yes.
They are limited. They can't just go super far away. And you're right. There are certain jump gates that can only get you to certain places.
Right.
And maybe that has to do with the hyperspace eddies or the ability of the navigation signals. Because if you lose your navigation signal, you get lost.
Yeah, but I mean, if your only real way to go long distances is to go through hyperspace, then what exactly are they doing when they're in real space? Okay, so let's assume they're traveling between two different jump gates. It's like, okay, how close are they together?
How close are what together?
The two different jump gates that they're traveling between. And if in real space, and if the two different jump gates are close enough together that you can make a real space transit between them.
Yeah, you can't. They don't, there's no indication of multiple jump gates in a system.
Right. That's my point. My point is that the raiders are attacking these guys when they're in normal space because they're heading off to a jump gate from where?
Where
do they start off with? That they're like out in the middle of nowhere now looking for a jump gate.
Yeah, I know. I kind of get what you're saying. But presumably if there's only one in the system, and a star system's a relatively big place.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe there's anything in the Epsilon system that they're in that's of any note other than the jump gate in Babylon 5 itself. And apparently as we see later, the Great Machine.
Yes.
But they're all in a pretty localized area. I don't think there's big trade, and I don't think there's any inhabited planets or systems in this. So yeah, clearly it's got to be nearby systems where this stuff is going on.
Yeah, and so I think it is the case that they didn't sit down and sort of figure out how all this stuff works. I don't think that's not the story that JMS is trying to tell. And the thing is, the parts of the story that JMS is trying to tell, he tells really well. The parts that he's focused on, it's stuff like this that the show didn't do particularly well, and I found a little bit frustrating. I am noting it for the record. I will press the I believe button and move on. But this stuff fits in the category of I'm not trying to. I don't try to figure out how it works and analyze it, because I've done enough of that to realize that way badness lies. It is not internally consistent, so there's no point trying to make it internally consistent.
Right.
So, okay. So next one is TKO, which I understand is your favorite episode, if I remember correctly. Oh, maybe you said not favorite episode.
Well, this would be one of the flyover episodes. If I'm going through and doing a rewatch, I might be doing my taxes while I'm watching this one or something like that.
Yeah, and this one, as near as I can tell, with the exception of Walker Smith saying, "Watch your back, Michael," like a couple of episodes before he gets shot in the back. With the exception of, I mean, this is about character development.
Yep.
And primarily about Ivanova's character development with just,
though it was a very minimal amount of time in this otherwise episode about boxing.
Yeah. I mean, they just sort of attached, the movie Rocky to it.
Yeah. So why don't we move on?
Yes. It is worth noting that for an atheist, Straczynski spends an awful lot of time doing a pretty respectful discussion of religion.
I didn't realize he was an atheist. I assumed he had to be at least Catholic.
No, he's a card-carrying atheist. That's what he's always said. But he says religion is a big part of life, and so he always includes it, and he's very respectful of it. He does, yeah. Okay, next episode, Grail. It's always good to see David Warner.
Yep.
I am struck by the incongruity of a walking stick on a spacecraft, and nobody seems to notice.
Yeah. Yep. But it's good to hit people with if you need to. So.
Yeah, and indeed he does that. Yeah. And I like the entire idea I like the humor in the entire idea that like I could sue you for what your grandfather did to my grandfather. How exactly does that work?
Actually, that was the funniest part of the whole episode.
Yes.
I thought that was this wasn't okay, because David Warner always just does a good job and stuff like that. But in another sort of, and it's not even, I don't even remember that there's a whole lot of character development with the main characters. These are all people we never see again. So
yeah,
for the judge, I think
this is the closest thing I think there is to a season one just plain throwaway episode.
Yeah. So why don't we? You want to move on?
I will say one thing about this though: the Noctilin feeder, right? We see its tentacle, and I'm pretty sure they reuse that prop later on in the episode where Londo's cheating with cards.
Yes. Where he has his own tentacle.
Where he has his own tentacle. But it also sort of makes me wonder, like, that's interesting.
They have the same planet, maybe?
Or, same background, et cetera, same genetic stock, et cetera. Okay. So next one is EYES, which stands for Internal Investigation. This is yet another instance of somebody coming in and telling Sinclair they were taking over a station.
Yep. I like this because it has Weyoun in it. Or Shran.
Is that Shran?
That's Shran.
The guy on the left?
Yep. Or the guy that played Weyoun.
Really? Okay, I have to confirm this.
I just did.
You did?
I've
Okay.
told you. You can't do it, can you? Can't press the I believe button.
Okay.
All right. So, anyways, internal investigation. They go back and second guess and Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
I kind of thought this guy.
Working
I
Babylon
can't
5.
remember. Yeah, I kind of thought this guy was a bit over the top.
Yeah, he was.
And easily baited and all that kind of stuff. So this is a series of sort of flyover episodes, 14, 15, and 16.
Yeah,
It's kind of some character development. We get a few things. We learn that not all Psychor people are evil or anything like that. They're just regular people doing their jobs and whatever. But his character, and I'm blanking on the actor's name, but he did such a great job in Star Trek so often. But he does a good job in Jeffrey Combs. Yeah, he does a really good job in this episode too, I thought. But the main baddie was just a little too, I don't know, over the top and stuff. But we do learn some of the background on all the people that were passed over in favor of Sinclair getting the job.
Yes, and so it adds to the mystery of how did Sinclair end up with the job, and so that part is actually interesting.
Actually, does this guy at some point say, "I won my battles"? Oh, but he didn't fight in the Minbari War. That's why he won some battles. Okay, never mind. Yeah. He won battles fighting against other humans. Yeah.
The thing is, on what planet does somebody from Internal Affairs be in line to be on the commander of the station?
Well, you can get assigned to the IG's office as just a regular officer.
Could be.
Yeah, I mean, my former CO was a SEAL, but then later he was working for the IG.
I kind of got the impression that this is the guy that's where his career path was, but I could be totally wrong about that.
No, clearly that wasn't a full-time career path. That's just one of the many assignments you do somewhere along the way.
Okay.
And maybe for a combat vet. Yeah, we don't want this guy leading our battalions. Send him over to Internal Affairs.
Well, and Earth War seems to have some interesting ideas about how the chain of command should work.
Or this guy was somebody's pet attack dog.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. This is the guy that gets sent out so that somebody else pulling the strings at a higher level doesn't get their hands dirty. So, but I think it does go to show, like you said, what the hell's going on in Earth Force and Earth Dome. So,
yeah.
All right, why don't we move on so we can get to some of the better episodes,
like this one.
Yes.
And I think this was a good one because this is the one where we first Legacies is the one where we first meet Neroon, who there's a recurring theme on Babylon 5, which is you meet somebody and they're a total dick. And then you later discover they're not as big a dick as you thought, and or they grow into being a non-dick. It's also one of the episodes of that follows the pattern of an actor plays two different roles in Babylon 5. He plays a good guy human and an asshole alien.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other way around, actually. I think there might be examples the other way around if I'm remembering it. I have to go back and double check. He's also one of the several actors that also showed up on Star Trek, right? Because apparently their production studios were they were like on the same.
Oh, he played a Cardassian.
Yes, he did.
Yes,
and somebody told me that I remember reading somewhere like Patricia Tallman was playing both Lita Alexander and had multiple guest spots on TNG at the same time.
Yep.
And so every now and then she shows up in the background of the on the bridge of the Defiant in a
Mhm.
Starfleet uniform.
Well, I
And
believe Patricia was also the stunt double for Crusher, right?
yeah, probably because she was a stunt woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably. But there was I think it was she that made the comment that the Star Trek cast used to go to the Babylon 5, raid the Babylon, because they always have an area where there's food and stuff in the for actors to sort of grab something in between scenes, and that the food area for Babylon 5 was way better than the food area for Star Trek, and so they would actually go over to Babylon 5 to raid them. But it's funny because they're on the outside. It's sort of like with sports teams, right? On the outside, there's a lot of people going like, I hate those guys because they're not my team. Whereas the people in the business just sort of go like, well, we're all actors and we work on each other's shows, and what's the big deal?
Hmm. Yeah.
So let's see. I love Neroon, and I
Yep.
also love the fact that Delenn is that sneaky because she steals the guy's body and like has the religious cast go head to head against the warrior cast.
Hmm.
And I thought that was
Well, at one point, Delenn, and I don't remember where this is, but Delenn points out that you've got the warrior cast, but the religious cast also has 1/3 of the forces.
yes.
So military force. So the warrior cast still only has 1/3 of the military forces, which
Yeah,
I don't know how that system ends up working, um, but
there's a
yeah, so they have the
weird,
military forces so that there's balance between the three, I assume.
yeah, there's some weirdnesses here, and we're going to see that in a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I mean, we see an episode or two from now, we discover that Lanier kicks butt,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
He's really got that entire David Carradine kung fu thing down.
I do like, and I can't remember who he grabs by the collar and lifts off his feet, just like, do not touch me in that manner again.
We,
We may
we
look, what's that?
we look like you, but we are not you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And oh no, yeah, he does it to Marcus.
yes, it was
He
Marcus.
does it to Marcus, and could you realize he could throw Marcus around in any manner he chose if he wanted to. So
Yeah, Lanier is a lot deeper character, and we really find that out. There's a couple of places where we really find that out. I want to say that doesn't something weird happen with Lanier in Day of the Dead,
yeah, yeah.
and then
And that's an interesting episode, but yes, in season 5,
yes,
I dislike how his arc turns, his story arc turns there. So I don't like what they did with him, where he just falls apart, essentially.
yeah, but I think if I remember correctly, and we'll get there eventually. I think if I remember correctly, he comes away from that experience going like, "Oh shit, I can fall apart. And now I need to make up for that."
Hmm.
And
Well, no, but he actually does. He actually, like, what was it? Oh, that's it. Sheridan's on the verge of dying, and he and Lanier could save him and chooses not to. There was an accident of some sort,
yeah,
and so then he's obviously ashamed, and everybody's like, "Yeah, he just left me to die." You think you know people, so
if I thought I remember that he redeemed himself afterwards somehow, but it's been a while
uh,
since I watched this show. This is
yeah,
one of
we'll
the
just have to wait.
this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do the rewatch is because
Yeah.
it'd been well.
All
Okay,
right.
so Voice in the Wilderness 1 and 2. This is discovering the Great Machine. Oh my God, does the Great Machine cause problems in this show? Um, well, the episode's problematic because like Sinclair and Ivanov are both risking death, doing a really silly maneuver where we're just gonna assume that we got plenty of room in the canyon in the planet to slow down because it's gonna take us 2 miles to slow down. So we'll just assume we got got room. We discover Londo's a badass when he wants to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the characters were, right? I mean, Jakar, we just don't necessarily know the details of their past, but they've all had service and done extraordinary things and all that kind of stuff. Delenn, Londo, Jakar, so Sinclair for that matter. So,
Yeah.
And, they could probably do a whole series of books on the past of each of these characters, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of the novels, but not all of them.
I read a couple too. The Great Machine, though, just sort of like, okay, you've given this super duper powerful thing to somebody, and then they don't ever really use it.
Yeah. Well, this has one of my favorite lines spoken by Ivanova. When the heavy cruiser captain shows up, and I can't remember what his name is, but he's in the
Hyperion.
He's in the Hyperion class heavy cruiser that shows up, and he's talking back and forth with the alien, and they're all both just doing their chest thumping. No, it's ours. No, it's ours. You will leave immediately, and all this kind of stuff. And Ivanova goes, worst case of testosterone poisoning I've ever seen. And I've remembered that line for 25 years now, or however long it's been, but I've always liked that one.
Which is especially funny because that's exactly how she acts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, the Great Machine's a problem, and we'll talk about that.
Well, actually, I would argue against that a little bit in that it's not really exactly how she acts. She is just reserved and shut off, repressed, whatever you want to call it. We see plenty of times where she lets her guard down and stuff like that once she's with people she knows and trusts.
Right, but we also see plenty of times where she's in total ball breaker mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. She's one of the she's like, I think, upset she never got to fight in the war, but she's ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, she's way more like Janeway than she is like Troy.
Yes. Well, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So
actually, she's probably more like the heavy machine gunner from Aliens, what Vasquez.
Yes. So then we get to Babylon Squared, which one of the things that I think that the show did not do a particularly good job of is giving you a good perspective of how much bigger Babylon 4 is. I believe that I've seen some stuff that's sort of like semi-canon drawings that compares the size, and B4 is like way bigger than
Really?
5. Yeah, I think it's way bigger.
It seems to me that it looks like it's shorter.
I think basically,
but maybe fatter.
I think basically, I mean, it doesn't have the thing sticking off the end, but I think it's I think that middle cylinder there is actually bigger around than the entire Babylon 5 station by a considerable margin.
Oh wow.
I think.
All right.
And I want to say it's been a while since I looked at that, but I want to say that there's somewhere that they gave some stats on what this is. Now, of course, the thing about the Babylon 5 station, right? 5 miles long. Okay, what does 5 miles long mean? So the answer is it means two different things, because Straczynski called an audible and changed it. It originally meant that the rotating cylinder part was 5 miles long.
Okay.
And then at some point, Straczynski changed it to the entire thing is 5 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do the calculation on 1G on the floor of the rotating cylinder, that the assumption there is that it's 11 miles long with a 5 mile long cylinder, and it's a mile across. And then Straczynski just sort of arbitrarily said, no, the whole thing is 5 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
which meant the timing's now all off, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Which
But
makes it a half mile or 3/4 of a mile or something like that.
yeah,
Wide. Okay.
but there's some places where they've actually got like descriptions of what the sizes of them are, and
Okay.
all the previous Babylon stations were a lot bigger. It's because they'd built in this, they had already put a lot of resources in. Babylon 5 was the budget version of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a recurring problem that at least in my mind, of the conversations that don't happen, and this is a case of the conversation that doesn't happen, which is conversations where the characters in the conversation know stuff that the viewers don't, and they don't mention the things that the viewers don't know, despite the fact it makes total and complete sense for them to have a conversation about those things at that point, right? They know about the importance of B4.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that there's a bunch of stuff going on there with Babylon 5 and et cetera, et cetera. You would have thought that at some point somebody would have made a reference to, how important the humans are, right? Remember
Mm-hmm.
the part with where, and no, none of that stuff happens. The closest you get is, oh, I learned during it turns out I believe that the humans have this innate capability to do stuff. When you can point to the old records that say, yeah, the humans built this station and it ended up going back through time, and that's a big deal.
But did only certain Minbari like Delenn and Kosh know that? No, that was the human station, or was this just manna from heaven at the time?
Well, first of all, this is the Gray Council. They're
Yeah.
read into all the secrets, right?
Sure. Yeah. The Great Council would be.
Right. They've got all the tickets. And the thing, Delenn actually at some point says something later on about how, yeah, we had no idea where this thing came from. Imagine our surprise when we saw you guys building it.
Yeah. So we're going to need to steal that. Someone's going to. But
Yeah,
this episode and the events in this episode bleed into lots of other events
yes,
throughout. And to be honest, it is ultimately, I think I would have had to have a whiteboard
yes.
with arrows and pictures and stuff like that to truly. I don't claim to truly understand this particular episode and who was in what spacesuit that we don't get to see their face and stuff like that.
Who knew what and when did they know it? And
yeah,
it reminds me a lot of trying to track timelines in the Terminator universe.
Yeah.
So the other thing that sort of struck me is that there's no mention of the Great Machine in this episode at all. You would have thought, right? It just happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody saw it happen, right? It's not like the Great Machine was any sort of hidden thing. Everybody saw it happen. Everybody saw the apparitions. Everybody saw the missiles. I mean, everybody saw the combat that took place, right? It was a public event. Mm-hmm. You would have thought that somebody would have said, hey, get Drell on the radio. Ask him if he knows what the fuck is going on.
Right. But they do mention the records from the Great Machine in the second or third season when they go back and redo all of these events.
Yes. So, yeah. But this is one of the reasons why I think the Great Machine is kind of a problem, in that if I had the super weapon / miracle machine right next door, it would be involved in a lot more of my day-to-day conversations.
Sure.
Every time there's an issue. Now they
did, but you're saying this with full knowledge. I mean, I'm just going to take the opposite just for the hell of it, but
sure,
just to test the theory. But these guys weren't used to the notion of having some giant weapon that maybe if they pissed this thing off. Oh, and remember, actually, they basically said, the Great Machine, when Drawl took over the machine in the previous episode, they said, I think he said, "Don't call us, we'll call you." Like, you don't have the option. We're not going to talk to you. I believe they very specifically said,
I need to go look that up.
I think you need to go back. I think you were missing one piece there, and I'm pretty sure that he said, "Yeah, by the way, I'm going to be busy for a while. Don't come back here for a bit."
Okay, that could be. That could be. It could be that
I think that's why
they
were on better terms with Drawl, or Drawl had reawakened himself or something for the events in season. I can't remember if it's season 2 or 3 where they go back and revisit these events. And then they get the records and they go, "What? You mean we steal it?" Right?
Yeah.
It's us. That's the biggest mystery. And it turns out it's us. So,
yeah,
that was a great reveal.
That's a good point. I mean, this is a great example of why this show is worth rewatching.
Yeah.
Because if you go back and you rewatch if you binge watch it, having been through it and know what's important, and then you come back and you go, "Oh shit, it was like right out there, like there was a gun sitting on the mantle the entire time and I never noticed it."
Yeah, someone pointed out to me once, you talk about learning Zathras. Zathras is one of my favorite characters throughout all this. But anyway, a little bit of philosophy, I guess. But when watching some of these shows, sometimes I try to make a point of just watching the stuff in the background, or after I've seen it a bunch of times, just looking at things in the background. Somewhere I read that, somewhere in Eastern philosophy, they focus on not the thing that's in the painting, the primary subject. It's all the stuff around it. And I've tried to keep myself doing that periodically, and I come to notice certain things that I might not otherwise have noticed. So, which is my point is that's a good way to watch this show.
Yes, it is. It's very much so. Very much so. Let's see. Okay, next one, Quality of Mercy. This is the one where we discover that Lanier is a badass when he wants to be. I think it's a much more important than it seems episode, along with Soul Hunter. And it really sort of highlights the fact that JMS is setting the stage for stuff later on that you don't realize that he's setting the stage for.
Yep.
This is the one where you discover that life force is something that can be sucked out and given and moved around, just like souls can be moved around. Mm-hmm. Are they the same thing? I don't know. They arguably could be, which turns out to be, he's going through and sort of like detailing how the metaphysics of this world works, because those later become plot points.
Yep. Yeah, this becomes a very important point in season 4.
So, and then we have the season 1 finale, Chrysalis, where we see Santiago assassinated. Delenn and Sinclair admit that she knows that he knows that she knows. So, I mean, I love that scene where it's like, I think you've kind of worked out. I think you kind of remembered the fact that what happened at the end of the war. Yeah, I did. Okay, we should talk about that.
Yeah, this is just a great. I mean, this and Voice in the Wilderness, along with Babylon Squared, I think are the real. I think are kind of some of the high points in the first season. Basically, my point is it keeps building and getting better throughout the season. So.
I don't understand. The one thing I don't understand seems to be that her having that discussion with Sinclair is a high priority discussion.
Yeah.
Why is spinning her cocoon such a time critical thing that she goes ahead and does it before she's had the conversation with Sinclair?
I don't reasons.
Yeah, because reasons.
Alien logic. They may look like us, but they are not us.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't quite fit in that regard. I didn't quite
Yeah.
understand that. But I generally liked it overall. Although the they're going through all the stuff that's in the crate, like the jammers and this and that and the other thing. It's like, okay, so that shipment didn't get through, but they still are able to kill Santiago without any problems. Why are they shipping that stuff through there? I don't understand why all that stuff went through B5, and as a result, some lurker could just stumble upon it. I mean, I understand the bit where they would recruit lurkers to move boxes around because they're doing stuff where they want the officials to know. But why go to Babylon 5 for a bunch of stuff that fit in a crate? Right? It's fairly small. Why do you have to transship it through Babylon 5? I don't.
Weren't those jammers going to be used there in the vicinity of Babylon 5 by the baddies on the station who were set to receive it, so that there can't be a signal that got out?
They blew it up at the IO. They blew up the ship at IO. It wasn't at Babylon 5.
Oh. Okay.
It didn't get the Babylon 5.
Right. Okay.
And so it seemed to me that there was just a couple of places where things were sort of hanging out there waiting to be discovered. And I don't understand why they did it that way. I mean, it sounded like you get the distinct impression that it's renegade forces within Earth Force that are doing it, or it's some sort of internal conspiracy. Why maybe there's an explanation there, and I guess I'm willing to press the I believe button on that. But that's the first thing that occurred to me. It's like,
well, because there are things in the real world that don't always make logical sense, but there's a reason for it if you know what dysfunction is going on that causes it.
yes,
Right?
yes.
I mean, think of most stupid rules that you've had to live with at some organization and stuff that's just completely asinine, and it's because somebody else found some loophole, and this is the only way to close said loop. All I'm saying is that the only thing I can imagine, and this is just me again spinning the tail to try to justify it, but maybe it was a mistake. Bad guys do make mistakes, and or maybe it's an indirect route to ship it someplace. That is, the indirect route sometimes is the better hidden route than the direct route, especially when you're trying to be covert about something.
I'm also reminded of a quote that I think comes from Tom Clancy, where it was something, maybe it was Larry Bond.
Actually, I'm sorry, hang on. It could be that it was on its way to Earth from a farther place in the Earth Alliance, right?
Could be.
They were on their way to get it to Earth, and because, hey, you can get the really good stuff from baddies out on the rim or something.
Yeah, but
or on the frontier.
Apparently they didn't need it.
Yeah, apparently not.
Anyway.
Well, then they had redundancy built into their plan, which is a good thing.
Could be. I'm reminded of something that Larry Bond or Tom Clancy or somebody like that said, that in fiction your thing has to be plausible. In the real world, it only has to have actually happened, which is a much lower standard.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, there were. Well, I believe when Clancy crashed an airliner into the Capitol building, nobody thought that was a truly plausible thing.
Yeah, I know so many people who knew Tom Clancy. Like the group of people that got together and played the game, the Red Storm Rising game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's probably what, like Chris Carlson and
Chris Carlson and Larry Bond and John Gresham, I think, was part of it. And I mean, it's like I can't. Todd Cowderer was part of it. I knew all these people.
uh-huh. Yeah.
I want to say that Chris was like the Red Navy commander.
Okay.
And so and I knew other people that had met Clancy too, because the sort of centered on that group. There was a group of people that were, this is when I was at CNA, there was a group of people that I met about that time, and they all knew Clancy.
Mm-hmm.
And several of them had worked with Clancy, and I just never met him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, so we get to see Morden come in. So Morden shows up a few episodes earlier, helps Londo get the Eye of Centauri back, or whatever they called that thing. This is where he makes the second move, where he wipes out the Narn, and you sort of get the impression. You see the first instance of what you later understand are shadows. He's having a conversation with a room that there's some weird lighting and stuff going on in the room, and some weird noises going on in the room. So you start to get the impression of who Mr. Morden is. Ed Wasser, incidentally, has largely retired from acting and is a general contractor doing home upgrades and stuff like that in the Los Angeles area.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I tried to find out what he was doing, and they gave the name of his company, and I looked it up, and sure enough, he's the owner of this company, this general contracting company that does house remodeling.
So if you're a Babylon 5 fan getting your house remodeled and he walks in, that might be a little creepy.
And
no,
you know
I'm
what
sure he's a very nice person. But
you know what would happen if he did that?
uh-huh.
I'd take one look at him and I'd say, I don't want any glowing tables.
There you go.
Okay, so here's the conclusions that I came up with from season one. Season one did a really good job of laying the foundation for what comes later. It defines all the characters, spend some time sort of, we get a chance to meet all the characters and find out a little bit more about them. We get the introduction with Morden and sort of hints at what the shadows are. We discover that souls and life force exist and can be manipulated by technology. We discover that Garibaldi really likes to drink, and it's a bad idea when he does that. We discover there's something rotten in Earth Dome, and that Straczynski doesn't let characters be smarter than the audience. And as I put it here, too much dependence on simple versus complicated surprises. And by that, I mean, go back to the episode of how could the Raiders possibly be getting here? They could have had a conversation where they talked about, well, it's got to be a mothership. And somebody says, do you know how expensive that shit is? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's got to be something else. Oh, shit. It was a mothership. At which point, you've now set things up for something that's more.
Yeah. It's outer space, and space is really big, and little Raider ships don't have hyperdrives, and they don't use normal jump gates.
but it's even more than that. It's like so the solution is obvious. I can easily see saying that can't be the solution, because even though it's obvious, the resource, it would be way too expensive, which then begs the question of where are these guys getting the money. That's an interesting thing that you then weave in, right?
Yeah.
The fact that these Raiders are able to afford a mothership implies to me that they've got backers.
Yep.
And that's potentially something else that's interesting to know, right? It's like, oh, this is a lot bigger than it seems. It's not just some low-level Raiders. This is actually, in effect, they're privateers, right?
Yeah.
And if we're under attack, it's not just criminals, we're actually under attack. So all the combat we see is very small scale. I mean, I guess we see the Great Machine versus the guys that are trying to steal the Great Machine. That's as large a thing as we see, right? You've got the Hyperion, you've got Babylon 5, you've got those guys, you've got the planet, but that's still a relatively small battle.
Mm-hmm.
We see that everybody wants flight pay whenever they can get it. And I would argue that none of the time distance calculations.
I think what we also learn is the importance of the question, what do you want?
Yeah.
And how important the answer to that question is.
Do you know where that question came from? Straczynski said that when you're writing a novel, when you're dealing anything with a character, there are two questions that you as the writer have to answer.
Who are they and what do they want?
Who are they and what do they want?
Yeah.
He turned this piece of wisdom about how to write characters into a 5-season long television show.
Yeah. I always thought that was an interesting question. If you go to the Inquisitor who says, who are you? You say your name and you get an electric shock for your trouble. And so how do you answer that question without reference to what your position, your job, your title, or your name or your family? And so it's interesting it can be kind of fun if you try to run yourself through that through that answering that question yourself, especially under the duress of the occasional electric shock. But let me see, there's something here.
I haven't quite had a job that had involved electric shocks like that. I've come close.
Let's see. I'm just curious here. Hang on just a second.
Okay, right. Here's a good comment. Maybe the Raiders could have taken a tanker or a transport for a mothership as a prize and adapt that. So that's a possibility. That's
what?
That the Raiders could have captured a ship and adapted it.
Okay, yeah.
Still implies a shipyard somewhere. Because you'd have to modify nothing else. You have to modify it to carry all that stuff. All the different raiders that
let's see here. Question begs the answer. I'm reading through something I wrote. I wrote down. I was bored at some point and wrote down some thoughts on that particular question. Well, maybe I'll collect my thoughts and see if it's worth, because it's like a full page that I wrote. But anyhow, all right. Well, that's about all I have for it.
Yeah, it's about all for me too. I do like this comment. Some bathroom remodels come with too high a price.
Oh, that's good.
Wright says, I've always thought that The Great Machine was an homage to the classic movie Forbidden Planet. So I was reading about this earlier today. Straczynski says that it didn't start out that way.
What didn't start out what way?
That The Great Machine was not so much an homage to Forbidden Planet, or at least the overhead shot where they sort of show all the stuff going on wasn't intended as an homage to Forbidden Planet.
Okay.
But when they sort of like did the scene, everybody went, "Oh yeah, Forbidden Planet," right? It's not like it wasn't lost, like it was lost on them. The implication that it was more along the lines of they kind of got there, and once they got most of the way there, they went, "Oh yeah, okay, this same sort of deal." Same sort of deal.
You know, about 20 years ago, I rented Forbidden Planet and watched it. And I was struck by because that was made in the mid-50s or something like that?
1956.
Yeah. Leslie Nielsen was the captain.
Yeah.
The good luck, we're all counting on you guy from Airplane. And he was the captain on that. But, that was a really good sci-fi show.
It was.
I mean, it was deep. It was thoughtful. You got the impression that if on their little flying saucer they had put two nacelles and a secondary hull on it, that you were on the Enterprise. They discussed that. They mentioned that there was this larger Federation out there and stuff like that. I thought it was pretty good, and maybe Gene Roddenberry thought it was pretty good too.
Yeah,
So
and there's a couple of things about Forbidden Planet that I like, in particular. I mean, it does suffer from the
well, it's 1956, so
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I wasn't even going to go with the special effects. I was just going to say it suffers from the standard Hollywood problem of how long were they on the planet? 3 days.
it's been a long time,
It's like
several days.
it's like 3 days,
Yeah.
maybe four, which is apparently plenty enough time for the captain to fall in love with a teenager.
Well, it always was for Captain Kirk.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a problem there. But I always like the idea that it's like, oh shit, we need to radio home. So in order to radio home, we need to take the ship apart to build a radio transmitter. And which makes, I think that actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it from the standpoint that it's like, okay, we have to, in order to do the FTL thing to make that work, we didn't have room on our ship to have like a separate FTL component just for the radio. And so we have to reconfigure this to make that part work.
Okay.
I liked that idea that like the FTL component is this huge thing and it's incredibly expensive. And if you want to do a radio, you pull all the Legos apart and reassemble them into a radio and then you get to rebuild your spacecraft. It's kind of
Okay.
All
right.
I kind of like that.
I didn't remember that specific part, but it's been a long time. So,
and this actually goes to in my head canon, what I want to see in Star Trek. If I were going to do Star Trek, what I would do, one of the things that I would redo is that when they're way out beyond all the Federation relays and stuff, that main deflector dish is not just the main deflector dish. It also has some science instruments and stuff. And I think that dish is also if they need to radio back home that dish and they're going like hundreds of light years, that dish has to be pointed in the direction of where they're radioing.
Subspace beacon.
Yeah, it is a big subspace dish. And so I think that it's like the equivalent of submarines monitoring the broadcast, that they send out a message to the receiver that they know is going to be listening to them all the time. But it's sort of like they'll say like, we're sending you this query. We got questions. We'll be waiting for your answer at such and such a time in this location. And so at that point, they need to be pointing their dish in the right direction because they're trying to get the response back.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like doing SATCOM communications in a submarine.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm sort of scrolling back here. Yeah, Stephen Ross says, all these Babylon stations destroyed, Babylon 4 disappears. Maybe Earthdom thought that the fifth station was a bad investment. Yeah, they very clearly did. In fact, I think that...
or maybe all of the generals were too smart to take command of the thing. Like, give it to that commander down there.
No, they said they still wanted it. But I think I think characters actually discuss about how the fact that Babylon...
Yeah, I'm joking.
They did Babylon 5 on the cheap because they had lost so much money on it, and Earth didn't really care about it at that point.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, Dustin says something about the B5 budget problems in seasons 2 through 5. They spent a lot less time talking about the budget later on.
Well, no, there was one where Ivanova and Captain Sheridan get moved to smaller quarters and stuff like that. and then they've got to move Talia out of her quarters. Just never mind that she saved the
Yeah.
Civil War and stuff. Like, sorry, we need the money. You're gonna have to get out of
Oh,
the
yeah.
quarters that we gave you.
And so like we've got this telepath that first of all was at least a okay telepath beforehand. Not Talia, Lita Alexander.
Lita.
But who's got Vorlon mods, right? So she's been buffed up about 3 different levels, right? Whoever it was, they paid for the upgrade kit,
Yep.
all the different in-game payment options they exercised on her.
Yep.
And so you don't want one of those people on your staff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't.
Yeah, they were not. Yeah, they treated her wrong. So they obviously they had to wrong her so that she would go
Well,
over.
you know what? The right answer, if I were doing that, the right answer would be that it was all part of a plot to sort of like they invented a much better reason than that as part of a plot to sort of to have her infiltrate
Mm-hmm.
because they thought that like the Drock were manipulating them or something like that. So the plan is they're sending her undercover, and she goes undercover and says, "Maybe I like these guys better."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would have been way more interesting than coming up with the dumbest explanation on the face of several planets because space, um, as an explanation as to why they can't like let her have a free apartment.
Right. Right. But space on that station, they point out that space on the station is also at a premium. Like fresh coffee is a difficult thing. The other one, and Garibaldi goes through trouble just to get fresh cooking ingredients and food ingredients and stuff like that because, hey, space and it's hard. And there's another one where they start talking about opening up a gift shop to sell trinkets to raise money for their budget and stuff. So they're always fighting the budget battle.
Okay, I stand corrected on that. Yeah, I guess we do.
Yeah. I mean, it's mentioned multiple times. So
Some of those are kind of problematic. The entire quarters thing is just sort of like, what the hell? What are you going to do with the space anyway? And really, they have a space problem. What about down below?
well, they have more people than they can house.
Yeah, it's a big station. It's
Cities are big too. Somehow there still seems to be, right?
yeah, but these aren't space problems.
Well, I think that what they mentioned is that people spend their money getting to Babylon 5 and then they run out when they're there and don't find whatever opportunity they're looking for.
Right, but I mean, it's not like Sheridan at all don't have jobs, right? They have jobs.
Sure, right.
And Babylon 5 is big enough that I'm pretty sure that they can, Sheridan can probably have good quarters. So there's goofiness.
Right. Well, no. They still get good quarters. It's just these big primo things come at a high price, and that's more money for the station.
Could be.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying these are all the best justifications and ways to discuss the financing of a giant 5-mile long space station. And that rent off 2 apartments puts even a dent in the costs of running the thing. But I don't know. So I'm not the accountant.
Yeah, Delon.
Here's the challenge of being a writer and doing this universe or world building type stuff is you have to build a whole world and you don't necessarily have the unlimited resources of the expertise of every type of person with some specialized expertise to ask them exactly how something gets done. You just got to start making stuff up as a writer because you don't have a full staff.
Are you trying to tell me that it's unreasonable to think that J. Michael Straczynski couldn't have thought of every criticism that the internet could have over the course of the next 30 years by himself? You
in 1990?
Yeah, you expect me to believe that?
Yeah.
Delon says the quarters issue was season 2.
Yeah.
Bob says they should refurbish level 13, which is mostly empty besides the one monster. Is that where the Noctilin feeder was?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, remember, there's a cult in there too, right? Hiding
Oh,
in
yeah.
there. Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that. Okay.
Yeah. It was forgettable.
Yeah. It is fun going back and rewatching these episodes.
Yeah.
But all right, I
think that pretty much wraps it up. We've hour and 36 minutes. So
yeah. Well, I didn't actually preface this by we'll finish early tonight, which is
no.
usually...
Had I had to work at 4:30 in the morning, I would have been done sooner.
If you had to work at 4:30 in the morning, you wouldn't have been here at all.
Well, that's a possibility too. I might have just said hello.
Chris and I would be finishing up on Lafudra right now.
So. Indeed.
Well, and we'll still get to Lafudra, and I'm gonna get to Babylon or to the Exordium series, and I've got lots of things to talk about. It's just a matter of orchestrating them into a coherent whole.
Yes.
Because I still want to go through and talk about various ship types and a couple of episodes on cruisers and this and that and the other thing. I just need to sort of pull it into a coherent whole, but I'm always reading about that stuff. So,
all right.
But in the meantime, I think it's time to declare victory. So with that in mind, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the fact that you came and you spent your Saturday evening with Pat and I. Pat, when do you actually you any chance that you might be around next week?
It's probably pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think next week is my last week. Kicks off my last week of I guess
of living in the same location with your family.
Yeah, something like that.
Or
yes.
like
for at least a couple months or something like that. There'll be a lot of back and forth. I don't know exactly what the schedule looks like yet. So
okay,
it could be easy. It might not be. So
understood. So in any event, I intend to be around. If nothing else, I think there's a good chance I may be talking about Lafudra with Chris Carlson. And so it makes sense to actually do an entire show on Lafudra because there's probably 6, 7, 8 episodes where I've made some reference to torpedo boat carriers in space. So let's talk about a torpedo boat carrier on planet Earth. So,
all right.
With that in mind, everybody, have a good weekend. Talk to you soon.
Night. See ya.